YeeFarn Phua is a director of sovereign credit ratings at S&P Global. Last month, S&P increased Pakistan's rating from B minus to B plus, which was a good sign for Pakistan's economy. Today, he's joining us from Singapore, and we'll talk to him about the reasons behind that upgrade, and we'll also ask him about Pakistan's economic outlook and what would Pakistan need to do to reach another historic rating. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Phua. If you could start with the recent news, last month S&P upgraded Pakistan's credit rating to B, which is a historic level since 2016. Can you share the reasons with us?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me on the show. So yes, you're right. We upgraded Pakistan to a single B rating just 2 weeks ago. So this was really predicated on the fact that we view that now Pakistan, the political settings are relatively more stable now. This has allowed the country to go ahead to implement very critical IMF reforms that has stabilized the fiscal positions. At the same time, because of the more relative political settings, institutional capacity has also improved as well, and that has allowed Pakistan's external metrics now to be better. Because of the IMF program, we are also seeing that bilateral partners have started to come in. With swap lines, with deposits also at the State Bank of Pakistan as well. So this has all helped to create more buffers for Pakistan's external metrics. At the same time, the IMF program has also allowed the country to improve its fiscal positions with higher tax collection, also with more controlled spending as well. And therefore, the fiscal targets, we noticed that the deficit has been improving. So these were all the factors that contributed to us upgrading the sovereign rating to a single B.
So if you can walk us through Pakistan's economic journey, you've been monitoring Pakistan since the last 4 or 5 years, if I'm not wrong, precisely from 2022, when Pakistan was probably at its lowest. And now Pakistan has reached a place where it is at a 9 or 10-year high. So what has specifically changed, or if there's one thing that you can point out in Pakistan's progress during this time, which has surprised you?
Right. Yeah. I think I wouldn't say surprise, but I think as I mentioned earlier, the cornerstone to all these credit metrics and also now more stable growth is really due to the more relative stable political settings. I think this has also allowed policymakers to put in measures that are more long-term in nature to augment the fiscal position. And also, because of the stability of the government, it has also allowed foreign partners to come in back again to rebuild the external buffers for the country. So I think it's really So I think the improvement we have seen in the last few years is really due to a stronger and more stable political setting, which also has allowed policymakers to go ahead to carry out much needed reforms.
So Pakistan's best ever S&P rating was probably in the mid 2000s. And for Pakistan to reach that rating, what would it need to do?
For us, it's really a combination of two factors that would have to happen hand in hand. It will be basically if fiscal and external metrics continue to strengthen together at the same time. This could happen if we see that the country's fiscal deficits get less than 3% of GDP on a sustained basis. At the same time, we also will need to see that government revenue will need to continue rising, while financing costs moderate as well, such as interest to servicing will also reduce as well. In such a scenario, we believe that Pakistan's government debt will fall below 60% of GDP. At the same time, we also will need to see improvements in Pakistan's external indicators. This will, see certain metrics that we are observing, which, for example, the narrow external debt falling below 100% of current account receipts. At the same time, gross external financing needs will decline to less than 100% of current account receipts and usable reserves. So these are all a bit technical, but these are all the key indicators we're looking for to move the rating up to the next level.
And what about the investment grade rating, the triple B minus? What would it take for Pakistan to reach that level?
Investment grade is still multiple notches away. So one step at a time. But generally, I think we can share some observations of what we see investment grade ratings, sovereign peers will look like in this region. One thing is institutional settings are usually stable and quite strong. There's also a strong capacity to implement reforms over the longer term. Right now, if you look at Pakistan's institutional capacity, as I mentioned, it has improved, but is coming from a fairly low base, right? Going forward, after the IMF program is over, where are the sectors that government will be looking at to reform to really raise the long-term growth prospect of the country? We also see that investment grade level ratings in this area, sovereigns tend to have fairly high growth as well. We're talking about growth levels, 4 and 5% and above on an annual basis, from a long-term structural basis as well. And at this rating level, we tend to see that sovereigns, especially if they're low income, tends to put a lot of their annual budget into infrastructure investments and also reforms in the economy. So I think that's something Pakistan would really have to work on. Continue to invest in infrastructure, socio-economic programs as well to uplift the standard of living so that we can get to a stronger rating level. The other thing that I think is also drawing the rating back is also the fiscal profile, which is still fairly weak, especially on the debt burden front. Debt to GDP for Pakistan is actually not that high when you see it compared to peers in the region. But what makes the debt burden so high is actually the very high interest to servicing revenue. Right now, Pakistan, because of very high cost of funding, which is also, but to begin with, that cost of funding is coming down, but it's coming down from a very high level. If you look at the government's interest servicing to revenue, you're still talking about 40+% of its revenue being spent on interest servicing alone. That also means that the government's budget allocation is also restricted in how much they can put on infrastructure. So I think for the next step up, to really go up to multiple notches ratings and above, you really have to think about the overall policy framework, the overall cost of funding for the government, and how this could be controlled to a much lower level before the budget quality of spending can be improved as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Phua.